Welcome to Bituminous Coal. I'll take you to the Napoleon Defiance and Western Railway. Let's go to Woodburn, Indiana, where they interchange with Norfolk Southern. Let's go to Cecil, Ohio, to see a train bringing cars back to that interchange. Let's go to Defiance, Ohio, at the railroad's office and yard to see locomotive maintenance, aided by a crane. Let's go to the Napoleon Defiance and Western. Let's go to the trains.
Whenever I'm on my way to Cleveland, I'm always looking out for the Napoleon Defiance and Western as I'm on 24. And so many times I have seen Norfolk Southern here with cars and a caboose. And I always wondered, who are they setting them out for? Well, duh, look at a map, mister. They're setting them out for the Napoleon Defiance and Western.
Yes, good idea. Let's look at a map. Woodburn, Indiana is about 4 track miles from the Indiana and Ohio state line outside of Fort Wayne. The line is ex-Wabash. From Woodburn and going east, the line is Napoleon Defiance and Western. From Woodburn going west, it's Norfolk Southern, Maumee Division, Woodburn Branch. Finally, a day without gale force winds. Blue skies even. But I tell you, the blue color of the sky is not what gets my attention here. Nope, it's these black hoppers. I mean, I'm used to black on gondolas, on tank cars, Norfolk Southern locomotives even. But not on hoppers. This is interesting to look at. I'm going to turn up the volume just a touch here so you can really enjoy that GP38-2 revving up and getting that load moving. And now, a surprise amongst the rolling stock? Norfolk Southern Caboose 555066. It was painted red, but sun fading has turned it orange. Used here as a shoving platform. The diverging track, currently occupied by the Caboose and other cars, is the lead into BF Goodrich. This is another train that I've encountered where I've been impressed with the efficiency of the conductors. I mean, these moves are happening without any great delay. They make a move, cars cut, subsequent move immediately follows. The cars for Napoleon, Defiance, and Western are now set out, and the remaining train is shoved down the B.F. Goodrich lead. And those vehicles passing by in the far distance, that's US 24. And I have driven over US 24 so many times and had seen these cars set out and even action on the lead to BF Goodrich. And at last I have stopped to capture it. But those of you who drive on our highways and look over at tracks, you can understand how I saw this.
Well, that was a pretty fantastic catch.
Haha, winds, but not gale force winds. Now we'll resume our trip down the NDW, and we'll continue geographically rather than chronologically. The next catch is to the east in Ohio at Cecil, Ohio, and in the snow.
Well, we've got a train stopped. It's the Napoleon Defiance and Western. And you can see there's a leased unit from Larry's truck, an old Jeep. I'd love to be able to get to it, but this traffic that's stopped in front of me is because the gates are down. And even though... Oh, we got some radio.
I thought the semi was turning, I didn't know you stopped. Fucking locked them up. Tag action is probably just flatter now. Oh well, they'll bounce out.
Very good. Well, I don't want to sit here too long. Oh, the train's on the move, so this should open up. Hopefully I'll be able to get into a position where I can shoot something.
Well, after the gates opened and the semis rolled on, I was indeed able to get ahead of the train, grateful for the track speed being what it is. And what good fortune smiles upon me. The intersection I happened to pick out of the thin air happened to have that GP20U that we had seen in the video I shot and showed to you several months ago. Nice to see that here. It's got a very interesting string of cars also. We'll see that in a bit. Our first train showed the origination of some NDW trains. This next train shows the end of the cycle for the Napoleon Defiance and Western, as cars are pulled back to Woodburn for interchange with Norfolk Southern. And we see that the grain elevator is, in fact, active. And while I'm set up on a city street, there's a lot of snow on the ground. I want to make sure that the driver has enough room to get by. Meanwhile, the train starts moving again.
Put that name in? Yep. Thank you. Right. Okay.
With our train passed, let's go back and have a look at this other train that's tied down in the spur. It has a fallen flag. Well, how do you like that? A Chicago Northwestern boxcar. We'll maneuver through the trees here to get a look in halves. Well, this car is not nearing end of service, having been built in 1995. It's just surprising to see that Chicago Northwestern livery. This far along since the merger with Union Pacific. All right. Next stop I'll make to the east is at Defiance, Ohio. This location has a former Wabash station on site, used by the Napoleon Defiance and Western as an office. When locomotives aren't rolling on the line, they can frequently be found tied down here. So I went looking for vintage locomotives. I found the vintage locomotives, but I found a crane on site, and it wasn't idle. This first look is to the west, towards the interchange that the NDW has with CSX. But in their yard, they have a whole lot of cars. And as I pan over this neighborhood, I'll note that behind the homes, you would find the Maumee River. Not high enough to actually see the water. But as I continue to pan, you'll see the tracks come and funnel in, and there's the bridge over the Maumee. Now, I will have to get a train there someday crossing that bridge. Well, seeing that crane extended in the air was very intriguing. And watching these folks confer, I wasn't really smoking out what was going to go on. I mean, yeah, I could see that the crane has rigged itself around the locomotive, the front end, but to what end, I don't know. As it happens, a man from Docks Crane and Rigging came towards me asking if I knew where to find a sandwich joint. Unfortunately, I did not. I did look it up and help him. But we got to talking and got the sense of what was going to happen, which was routine maintenance. In a lot of shops, they have the sort of facility where the locomotive simply is ridden into the building, and there's a pit, and the work is done at the pit underneath. Also, you have gantry cranes on sites. Well, the Napoleon Defiance and Western has neither, and so Patriot Rail, its parent company hires out docks, crane, and rigging. So what's going to happen is the crane is going to lift the front end of the locomotive, and the trucks with the tractive motors are going to be pulled out. And the servicing will pay attention to the parts therein. Now, this is a fun and maybe curious bit. I certainly had to think about this for a second, because what I thought they might do, not knowing exactly how the locomotive is constructed, I thought they might bring a switcher locomotive over, couple up, and pull the trucks that way. But in fact, the knuckle coupler is attached to the car body of the locomotive and not to the trucks. So the pickup truck you see being positioned, this red pickup truck, Patriot Rail, they're going to use that to tug the trucks out from under the locomotive once it is jacked up by the crane. All right, we're about to have liftoff now. Here's the cool part. Usually, flying the drone is all about getting up high. But in this case, I really wanted to get down low, almost to ground level, so I could see that daylight between the car body and the traction motors and the trucks. Look at that. There it is. There's that daylight. And the crane lifted it so effortlessly. There was no change in sound even. It was incredible. I know what I said a minute ago, and it worked for the shot I wanted to get, but it still is really cool to get up high with a drone. And sometimes just to be right over top of what you're looking at, looking straight down. the servicing of those parts went really quickly. And at this point, they're ready to reposition that red pickup truck to the other side of the crane and locomotive so that they can pull the truck. So they can pull the trucks and the traction motors back into place. At this point, they realize they overshot the placement, so a little bit of back and forth going to be necessary to get it in precisely the right place. Locomotive PREX 1601. Built in 1951 for the Atlantic coastline. A GP7, but then rebuilt as a GP16. And on this day, being serviced. Well, looks like they've got her squared away. And in the meantime, very faintly, I heard a train passing on CSX just beyond the interchange point. I always enjoy seeing a short line at work, and I've always enjoyed seeing the Napoleon, Defiance, and Western. I've never cared for those barbs thrown their way about a world's worst track.
This is the railroad that has the reputation of being the worst track in America. By the way, I don't care for that. That company has worked really hard to improve and rehabilitate that track after years of neglect by their predecessor railroads.
See? By the way, if you want to see the first Bituminous Coal video featuring the Napoleon, Defiance, and Western, and that clip, there's a link below and at the end of this video. So, I do hope you've enjoyed this look at a regional short line that's working hard to serve their customers and to improve their property and equipment. I hope you'll join me again, and I'll take you to the trains.